go. All right. And we'll keep letting people in for just a few more minutes, a few more seconds probably. And great. I think we'll go ahead and start. So hello, everybody. Welcome. It's good to see we have, as always, we have some familiar faces and some new faces in the group. This is going to be a slightly more intimate session, I think, which will be fun because I think we'll have a chance for folks to share on their own experience. We've all done demos, and what we have to offer today for you are the experiences and learnings that we've had over the years. We very much want to make this interactive. Lee, I think you wanted to mention about how folks should handle comments.
Yeah, sure. First of all, thanks for everyone being here. One of the things that you can help me out with is just if you could just write in the chat your name, your name's in the chat, so just the company name that goes along with your name. So that way we'll have a kind of record in the chat log of what companies were represented by which individuals. And then thank you. And then in addition to doing that, during the presentation, Jim and I will be talking quickly through the points and not really stopping for questions there, but while the questions are top of mind, please put them in the chat and we'll deal with them at the end, or we'll just contact you personally after the presentation is over to make sure they're answered. And the last thing is if as we're going through something, it says, oh yeah, that happened to me when I was demoing, or that was really relevant, just give us a thumbs up or some other indication in the chat that the same thing has happened to you. If including, if you've got a great story to tell about that, we'll try to get that in at the end if we can.
We love it. So today we're talking about how to approach your product demos. Of course, demos, I've always said, are when your product meets the world. Meeting the world in one-on-one situations for startups is almost the perfect spot, both to sell, but also to receive feedback and to understand how your product is received in a live environment. There's only so much you can get out of analytics for anonymous users who come to your site. It's all very valuable, but when you have someone on the horn and you're actually talking through your features, this is just a tremendous opportunity for any company. I've always felt like that. So let's talk a little bit here about a few points and we'll open these up. The first thing that I would say when it comes to demos is make sure they want one. And it is a mistake I've made many times to assume going into a call or an interaction that, well, of course they want to see the product. Of course they want to experience what we've worked so hard to put together. But the fact is sometimes they don't. And I was astonished probably in my most recent round of fundraising at how few VCs really want to see the product, at least in the first meeting. Many of them would prefer to see the deck. You probably had the experience too of folks who don't even want to talk about a deck or a demo. They just want to talk and ask their questions and see how you perform with the pitch without the tools of the demo and the deck. And so make sure going in that they want to see a demo. Don't launch into your demo. Lee will talk about how important it is to get going quickly with your demo, but don't assume that they want one. Think about your audience. Your audiences include, obviously customers you're selling to, investors who you want to invest in your company, recruits, folks you want to bring on, partners. All these folks may or may not want to see it, and you should always ask. And don't be afraid to change course if you start in on the demo and you sense a lack of engagement. If you see just a line of avatars on the screen on Zoom and no one's asking questions and you're asking them if they have questions and they're saying nothing, don't be afraid to abbreviate it and try to move to something that is more engaging, because if they're not engaged, you're going to lose them and you're just wasting your time in that case. And kind of a corollary to this is, no two demos should really be too alike. If you're giving the same old demo over and over and over, it sounds like just a repetitive process. That means you're not probably getting the engagement that you need in the demo. And so what I've tried to do myself, at least, that's worked reasonably well and better as I've done it more, is not to start with looking at the product for the demo, but to try to make a list just like you would in developing and designing a product, of the personas. So if it's an investor, you might have one list of takeaways that you want them to have no matter what. Because the demo is not about just educating them on how great the product is. It's driving home the key points that you want them to take away from the demo, such as, this is the most secure platform, or this one integrates the best with other products. What is your differentiation? So if you're talking to an investor, your demo ought to be about the points in your product that are different from the competition and that distinguish your product. They shouldn't just be about the product generally. So start with that list of desired takeaways and work back to pull out the product features and the flow that you think illustrate those takeaways the best. And don't be afraid to move on the fly and respond to questions. The best demos are ones where you have engagement from the listener. They ask you a question and you're able to move in the demo immediately to the part of the product that answers their question and illustrates the point you want them to take away. It is something that takes a lot of discipline, and I've struggled with it myself over the years, but the more I focused and spent 10 minutes before every demo making that list of takeaways and double checking that I'm demoing the features that matter to those takeaways, the better I've done in terms of demo impact. There are some implications of that. Your demo setup and your prep needs to be deeper, and you need to be able to go anywhere in your product during the demo, obviously, and that's critical. Next point I wanted to talk about was prototypes, which I'm sure folks are using here, if only in the design and development process. What I mean by this is the kind of prototype that can give you the interactive flow of your product within a product like Figma or Envision. And there's quite a few of these out there now. I'm most personally familiar with Figma just because we've always done our design work in Figma, but Figma is a beautiful thing in its ability to create demos that move through your product. So our design development process typically has been to design in Figma and then create each user flow that is important and relevant within Figma. And you can use that for a bunch of different purposes. You probably know you can put that into usability testing very easily. There's a number of products that connect to Figma and let you put your user flow in front of real people and see how they interact with the product without having to code anything except the design. I'm suggesting using that as well for your demos. And there's a few cases where that really shines. They work inside the browser. And so it's very easy to have your live product in one tab and your prototype on Figma or some other product in another tab and move easily between the two. And that allows you to do some pretty cool things. It allows you to demo unbuilt features. Often in a demo, you might say, well, here's our product. We're showing you some features, but it's one of the takeaways I want you to have is that we're going to have a Slack integration really soon. Well, I'm going to show you exactly how that's going to work. And I've always found that the prototypes give you a very easy way to demonstrate features that move in and out of your product. And you guys know from our prior workshops, if you've attended, that my personal belief is we're now moving into the phase in legal tech where it's all about APIs and integrations, making sure that your product can work within larger products or larger platforms. Using these prototypes in Figma or other products like Figma allow you to show the user the back and forth between your product and other products. You just grab the screens from Slack, mock them up, and put them into the prototype in Figma, and you can actually show them very seamlessly how to go back and forth. And you can do that in a way that is much more manageable within a demo than having to leave the browser, go to Slack, or go back and forth in that way, which is pretty awkward. So really take some time. If you aren't already using prototypes for your demos, take some time and take a look at how easy it is to set those up in say Figma. And if you need to, it's really easy to hire people on Upwork now who are just, I call them the Figma jockeys. They're making their whole career out of being experts on working with that product. And they can set up prototypes literally in less than an hour that show you the entire flow of part of your product. And so that's one important point to take away. I'll turn it back over to Lee for a few points here. Go ahead, Lee, you're up.
Yeah, I'm up, but I'm now unmuted and up.
Oh, there
Even
you go.
better.
Yes, sir.
So first of all, thanks, Jim. I think it sets a lot of the next part of this discussion up nicely. One thing, if you can help me out, everyone, in the chat, because the next section is basically ask questions before. So I'm going to ask just a couple questions. So I guess the first one is, how many of you have, just by put a thumbs up or thumbs up, thumbs down, how many of you are the person sort of in your company responsible for giving a demo of your product to someone, like you're the CEO, biz dev, sales? Maybe you can just write sort of, just go ahead. If you are the one responsible, just say, you know, a CEO, founder, biz dev, sales, whatever role that might be for you. So all you have to, like for me, you know, in my company, I'm basically CEO, founder, and so I give a lot of demos. I've given a lot of demos throughout my whole period of time. So the part of this first idea of asking questions before you start is it allows you to take the power position in the demo. A lot of what you're going to hear from me today is talking about persuasion and the importance of influencing people. And your ability to influence your audience, the people receiving your demo, is going to be much higher if you can get them to take some small action at your request. And you can see how I've manipulated you all into taking actions here in the chat by, you know, putting in your company, you know, your company name or what the answers. I really did want those answers, but that technique, obviously it's different in different settings, but in Zoom, you know, when you're actually giving a demo and you're looking someone in the eye and you're responding back and forth, you can say, well, why don't we start with intros? I'll start with my intro. And now how about you? And so again, all of these are very subtle ways of you taking control of the demo. It's very natural in a demo, if this is for, you know, with an important VC or whoever it might be, to have a little bit of nervousness. I think practice can kind of help with a lot of that. But this shifting to this attitude that you're driving, you know how to drive, you practiced driving before, and you're going to be successful in this in the whole process. So one of the other ways in which I like to be polite and also take control at the beginning of a demo is start with a time check. And instead of saying, oh, we've got this meeting scheduled until, you know, until 11:30. So does that still work for you? That's one type of time check. It's a little, and it's better than nothing. The way I would usually get into it is with a little more humor and say, well, you know, I've told this story a lot of different times. I can do the 60-second version, the 2-minute version, the 6-minute version, the 60-minute version, the 6-day version. Only my wife has heard the 6-day version. So, you know, any kind of statement that says that. So which works best for you? Were you thinking 6 minutes, 15 minutes? So by going to that extreme, and then they know when the meeting is blocked for, so they might say something like, well, you know, try to cover it in 15 minutes or 20 minutes. The more they're used to hearing pitches, the more they'll have a definite opinion on how long they want it to be. If it's the first time anyway, so it's just very polite to do that, and it gives them a feeling like, okay, I've asked for 15 minutes of this. I'm really going to give them 15 minutes of my attention before I start, you know, turning my camera off and checking my email on the side or whatever else they're doing to multitask during this process. The other thing, and this is probably normal for anyone who's done sales before, almost any kind of relation, even gone to a cocktail party, you're almost always searching for some point of commonality that you can connect to the person with. So where you went to school, what sports you like, so you have kids, you know, what you did during the summer, how bad COVID has been, whether you've had COVID or not. I mean, there's 1,000 things that one can do. And it's really all just to begin to have a little bit of rapport with your audience. So
hey, Lee, one thing I wanted to add in that before the next point was, I've always found too in legal that understanding the use cases that they really care about and really making sure you're talking about those use cases. So are they a paralegal focused thing, or is this something that's for general counsels? And make the examples that you use as relatable as you can to what their actual position is. Here, I'll take you to the next bullet.
Yeah, I think it's within that process, I think, just building on what Jim said, I think there is also value in asking, again, a sales situation is a little bit different, but definitely in a sales situation, I would try to understand are using any products in the competitive space in which I'm operating, because you'll know a lot about what to say and what to emphasize during your pitch if you have a sense of what they're not, if they're actually users already of something in the space, or just what their general market knowledge might be. People generally don't like to, you want to anticipate what they already know and are already thinking. And assuming you agree with that, say that first. And we'll get into that in a little bit. So the concept of talking to VCs is in my mind different than talking to customers. And they, as Jim said earlier, they definitely require a different kind of demo and a different level of they want to be in the power position. Okay, so if they sense you trying to take the power position, you're going to get in a battle. So so you have to adjust your strategy to the fact that they would like to be the experts in the room and in the power position. They do nothing all day long, more than this, but in my cynical view of VCs, they do nothing all day long but listen to pitches from entrepreneurs and look for holes in them, and in 1 in 100 they might decide to invest in. So you kind of want to understand your position in their life when you walk in to pitch a VC, or if you're doing a VC, a pitch over this. They do need to deploy their funds, so they're going to be polite, and good ones are going to be, they're going to navigate the meeting in a way that makes you feel good by the end of the meeting. They're not all good. So one of the things that, and if you can research this ahead of time, then that's great, but it's to just, and these are questions they'll know the answer to, so they'll feel good about you asking them, which is, before I get into my pitch, I just want to make sure we're talking appropriately to what you want to hear. Just like Jim said earlier, make sure you let them tell you the parts of the pitch they want to hear or not hear. And at some point, usually at the after part of the discussion, you can get into, before we get into, whether you liked or loved or love this, our story, just to get a sense of what is the check size that you took. Well, what is the fund? How much how large is your fund? How much remaining capital is in it? What's the check size that you typically write for a company of the size that we are, of the stage that we are? These are all like pre-qualifying type questions. It's a subtle way of getting a sense of who they are and whether they'll fit your model or not. Assuming those questions and there seems to be actual interest, then another way to talk about it is when you get around to putting up what your the money that you're intending to raise and at what valuation. You can, let's say you're raising $1 million at a 10 million post money valuation, and you got that on the table, and you're talking to a pre-seed or seed VC, and you say, order of magnitude, what size checks do they write? And they say, well, 25K to 200K. And you say, okay, perfect, that fits within our window because we're raising this. So you have a nice transition into what you're trying to do. If you can do it, sometimes at the end of the pitch, they'll tell you where they stand. It's like, well, this isn't really a fit for us, or maybe you can go off and get some more traction with your core group, or when you get to, 50K MRR, then that's really more our target area. They'll have some set of things that when they're effectively saying no to you, or they always really just say not yet. When they're doing those things, then that'll be a chance for you to essentially say, well, obviously this isn't a fit for you for the financial reason or whatever the reason. Is there a way we could have, are there things that you wanted to hear in this pitch that you did not hear? And that's a most open-ended way for them to kind of begin to drill in and tell you what you did wrong. You want to take good notes during that part, and be ready to improve the next time.
And Lee, let me add to that too, that in the context of a pure sales demo, those questions at the end or toward the end, that's the gold in this, right? Because if you say to them, well, does this look like it would fit your needs, or however you phrase those kinds of questions, would this work for your team and so forth? Number one, if they don't come back with something, you've learned something. That is, silence is signal in that case. And if they come back with something specific, you really learned something. And every demo, in my view, every single time you do a demo is accretive to your knowledge. It is worth doing, even if you don't make the sale, because you've absolutely learned something. about the market, about the buyers. And if you're like me, you've found that as you've done demos over and over on the product, every time they're different, in part because of who you're demoing to, but also in part because you've picked something up. You've picked up another little bit of fact from the marketplace that makes the next demo even more compelling. You ready for the next one there?
Yeah, well, sure. It's kind of the same one in a way. The Jim's point, I'm gonna do like a foot stomper on Jim's point. I went to the Air Force Academy, and when the professor said something that was important, and half the cadets are asleep in the room, it was the responsibility of some cadet to stomp his foot on the floor to say, okay, that was really important. Everyone could wake up and quickly put that down in their notes, because that was going to be on the test. When Jim said that with each demo, you pick up on these little things that allow the next one to be better. So I'm listening to Jim talk, and this is the first time we've done this pitch together. And he says, silence is signal. It's like, oh my gosh, what a perfect 3-word phrase. I'm going to totally steal that and put that into my act, because I've never heard that phrase. And yet it takes in this whole, I'd have to talk for a paragraph like I am right now to get the essence of what that word is. And marketing and sales and demoing and all of that is really about repetition. And so the shorter you can make it, the easier it is for them to repeat it. And so if I said, I've got a new system for dealing with demos that aren't impacting the customers, because we all know that silence is signal. We've solved the problem of silence and signal. Now that you know that silence is signal, you can use that as a key to key you into dropping your cup of coffee or something to break out of this dead space that your presentation is. I'm just riffing on that concept of silence as signal. That is exactly the kind of thing you want to be listening for as you give demos. One of the in the last time we gave a webinar, one of the concepts was about how to do the ask, for when it comes time to say we're raising 100K at $1 million valuation. And then we also talked about pricing models and how you can send signals with your pricing models. And one of the things that I said was that in products like the products in legal tech that you have, where people don't really know what they are and what they do or how much they should cost, and how good they are, essentially by setting the price correctly, you can indicate the value. So I sum that up to say price is a proxy for value. Now, I had never said in my life price is a proxy for value before that last seminar. And so now that I've got that phrase, that's going to be in every pitch that I give. And so if you can boil things down to like a single tight phrase, remember those phrases, and then figure out a way to drop those little golden apples periodically throughout your pitch, because those are the messages. I like the way Jim said it at the beginning, that you really want them to walk away with. So this relates to one of the things about, in order to deal with questions, you have to really, well, there's several things. First of all, you need to clarify that you've understood the question. Okay, so a lot of times people will ask for something, and you have the curse of knowledge. Okay, you can answer every question. You could write a term paper on every question. This is your product. You've been living and breathing it for n number of years. And so the temptation is to hear in the naive question that you have a ton of knowledge about more than is being asked for. They teach you, I have 2 kids and now 6 grandkids. They teach you when you're raising your kids that at some point they're going to ask about the birds and the bees. And what they say is, do not tell them everything. Find out exactly what their question is and answer just that question, because it's not time to pull out the charts and give them the whole sex education talk. You just want to give them enough to answer where they had some curiosity or something they didn't understand. You can only do that if you can't guess what the person you're demoing really means by their question. You have to do some level of clarification, and it's usually pretty easy to do, to just narrow in. It's like, oh, when you said that feature, you wondered how you invoke that feature. I'm just making this up. You can see up here we've got the menu items, and we get to the feature in this way. Is that the kind of invoking, or are you talking about when would you need this feature? And so now we're clarifying, and now we can begin to answer, well, he really wanted to know, when would I ever need that feature? He just phrased it slightly in a way that would have triggered my curse of knowledge to explain how our menu system works, which is clearly not what he even cared about. So super important to clarify the questions. And a good way of, actually, I'm working with another client right now where we're dealing with this curse of knowledge problem, because he has to give a 3-minute pitch. The investor format that he's in, they only allow 3 minutes for the entire pitch. And so we've got it kind of squeezed into 3 minutes in these very densely packed sentences with long multi-syllabic words packed throughout it. And what I'm starting to realize is we can barely read, as we try to practice reading these sentences, we can barely get the sentences out correctly ourselves, reading them off the screen, much less how little people are actually understanding of it. So it's crammed with this curse of knowledge problem. So the technique that we're going to use to fix that is we're going to run the entire pitch through one of these systems that rates the language difficulty. So is this at 3rd grade level? Is this at 6th grade level? Is this at PhD level? And I bet we're at PhD level right now, just because of the vocabulary we're using. And even if the vocabulary isn't super long, if it's filled with jargon, then you're going to be talking right over the heads of most of your audience. So anyway, you need to find techniques to deal with that curse of knowledge issue. So I'll turn it back to you, Jim.
So here's and I apologize, that's an archaic phrase, wingman, I think. But
are we in the wing person world now, Jim?
We're in the wing person world, and that's good. But maybe I mentioned it in part because my wife made me watch the original Top Gun, and as part of the marketing blitz. So now we're ready to go see the new one. But this is one where I hadn't really experienced it until my last company, where we did a lot of demoing with 2 people from the company on the call, and I can't tell you how beneficial this has been for me personally. Number one, it's a little bit of a safety net, and it allows you to be able to turn to someone else. Someone else can kind of pull you out of a problem if you're not expressing it well. Somebody else can stand ready to help you out. But more importantly, it's really like you wouldn't go into a trial these days without probably considering a jury specialist, somebody who just sits at the trial and watches what the jury does. The beauty of Zoom in part is if people are allowing their video feed on during that demo, you can actually understand what their expressions are. You can see where they're falling off. You can see where in the demo they're turning to start to multitask or take another call or something. And so having someone with you in the demo, super, super useful. They also should be tasked with taking detailed notes, because we all know that in the rush of the demo and the adrenaline of the demo, you're not going to take any notes if you're the presenter, and you're just going to have in your head. So worst case is, once you're done, immediately go and transcribe those notes and make sure those end up in HubSpot or wherever they need to be, so you can have access to them later. But even better is to have someone on the side who's taking notes as you go. And then what we did at my last company is, after every demo, we took another 5 minutes to synthesize together exactly what our takeaways were from that demo, and to put those in the can so that we learned from those and we could share that knowledge. Because those phrases and those little insights that come out of each demo that become part of the future demos, those happen better and more often and more consistently if you have 2 people. Now, I know it's a big ask, because if you're doing 3 or 4 demos a day, having 2 people in a startup on those demos is a use of time. And so it's not without cost. So you may not always be able to do it, but when you have the luxury of having someone by your side on that, I actually think it's really good. And particularly if you start that way, you might say to yourself, well, we're going into a period of doing a bunch of product demos in sales. Let's do at least 10 together before we split up and do them separately. And just think about whether you can afford that time. I would encourage you to give it a try, because I think you'll come away feeling good about it. And I'll turn it back to you, Lee.
Okay, and this is the chance in the demo for everything to break. So so I'm going to share my screen here, Jim. And we tried this before. It says you cannot start sharing while the other participant is sharing. So I guess you have to stop yours for a sec. and I have to start mine. And let's see how well Zoom works here. So if everything worked perfectly, you're seeing something that says the law of 60 seconds. Okay, I'm going to assume that was good for everyone. This message. Okay, so I'll cover a couple of these laws, and this is the beginnings of 22 immutable laws of marketing, but we don't have time for 22, so we'll start with a few of them, and we'll go for about 10 minutes on these, however deep we get into it. So the law of 60 seconds, I think the slide that Jim had up said the law of 30 seconds, so I gave myself an extra half minute here, but this I got this law from Jason Calacanis, and he does a lot of investing in angel companies, probably 1,000 angel investments so far in his portfolio. He wrote a great book actually on how to do angel investing. And early in my career, not my career, but his career, he was nice enough to call me drunk, on crack, and delusional because of what I was saying in my pitch. So I've been on the receiving end of his criticism, but he has, I guess it comes with some merit because maybe not his comments about me, but his idea of the law of 60 seconds. What he says is that there's, in his mind, whenever he starts a demo, he starts this virtual stopwatch, and he's waiting for the demo to get onto the screen and for the person to start talking about their product and start showing at least product screens if it's not if they can't do a live demo or they don't have an MVP yet, but ideally it would be a live demo of the product. And he invests in early stage companies primarily. So his logic is kind of, you sort of can't dispute his logic, which is that if the product is great and if the CEO loves his product or her product, then she will want to get to the demo as quickly as possible. And the demo is not always about demoing features. It can be about telling your story wrapped in your product up on the screen. And so you're not saying this is how we, cut a picture from here and paste it in here. You can be cutting a picture and pasting it into here, but you don't have to say those words. You can talk about the importance in the legal world of including pictures in your trial briefs, or whatever it might be. And now here's a tool that allows you to do that. So this is kind of rule number one. I think it is below the rule that Jim said, which is find out if they want to see a demo of your product, which Jim mentioned earlier in the presentation. And some audiences, they're not going to make a decision, at least in a first meeting, about that. They want to see the financials or whatever part of the demo that they want to see. But give them a choice. We can do a product demo. We can go right into financials. We can talk competition. We can discuss, we can talk about the ask, what valuation, what we're looking to raise. We have all the slides you could possibly want. You can just tell us how you want us to order them to be most receptive, most attentive to what your needs are. But in the absence of that, get into the demo as quickly as possible. So that's the law of 60 seconds. So the next law here is the law of 6 minutes. So there's a great book that was written called Say It in 6. And the lead story in the book, Say It in 6, was that the Gettysburg Address, probably the best speech ever given over time, at least in our country's history, was, I think it was like 249 words, and it was given in about 2 minutes. So it was incredibly concise, and it changed history. Now, we're not all Lincoln, so we're not going to write the condensed, 2-minute version of how we explain the Civil War. But we can do better. And it's called the law of 6 minutes. And so if you're the actual end-to-end, you need to have a version end-to-end of your pitch that is no longer than 6 minutes. And there's probably, and that really gets your key points across, leaves the messages that you want to leave with the audience, and has a chance to kind of hook them on why they should invest in you or why they should become your customers. Now, Steve Jobs, when he launched the iPhone 1, I went back and looked at the video. It's 79 minutes long. Okay, the entire pitch is 79 minutes long, so more than 10x kind of what is recommended here. He didn't get to the demo until 15 minutes and 31 seconds into that 79-minute pitch before he started demoing the product. So all of this is basically said right here. We're not Steve Jobs, okay? We're not gonna be able to stand on stage and hold 4,000 people in an audience, with bated breath, waiting for the very next thing that we show. At some point, maybe we'll get there, but we're not there right now. So just keep it short, keep it concise, and 6 minutes should be plenty of time to tell your story. Says the team that's now going to hold your, and has a 60-minute presentation planned here. So when you have enough time to talk in longer chunks than 6 minutes, then break up your longer speech into 6-minute chapters, if you will, and make each chapter compelling. So the way you make a chapter compelling, I call it the law of the 3 wows. So when going back to Steve's demo of the iPhone 1, it really is worth watching if you want to just see a master at work in terms of how he did his demo. So he finally 15 minutes in, he's got him, salivating to finally see what this new iPhone thing is going to be about. So he brings it up. So first of all, the genius of how the demo was actually done. So if you look on this, there was basically a big screen at the top. This is a snapshot out of the video. There's a big screen at the top that shows the cover of the iPhone. And then there's a little camera on Steve's hand as he's actually doing these motions, okay? So obviously a big thing about the iPhone is no one has seen a smartphone that you can just move your finger around and do these amazing things with. And so if you'd have just had a demo that just showed the screen, but not how you were interacting with it, it wouldn't be nearly as impressive. In the early days of my career, we demoed a product called Ventura Publisher, and we were the first company where you could have a page with a bunch of paragraphs on it, and you click a paragraph and then you tag it as like headline 1, headline 2, headline 3, body text. And if we didn't explain to you that we'd selected that and then showed the mouse going over and clicking on that headline, the document would have been changing, but it wouldn't be nearly as impressive as the sort of one-click way in which we were doing that. So you want to show the actions that do it. The words that I chose for the 3 wows here are scrolling. After his first one that got the first applause line was sliding the slider from left to right and the thing turning on. Okay, so that got applause. Okay, that's what a master can do, is make turning on the product an applause line. The next place where he really got them was, and this is, I call this the law of actions over words, show don't tell. He got to everyone knew what an iPod was, so he went first to the iPod section of an iPhone. He didn't even start talking on it until much later. So he goes to that part and he shows the list of all your albums. Now on the iPod, you probably spun this wheel around to pick it. It was totally a piece of trash in my view, but anyway, I'm not Steve Jobs, he made it work. So, but in this case, he brings up the list of 200 albums and he just flicks it. Okay, he just flicks it with his finger. I have to like demo it this way, and it goes scrolling up. We've all gotten used to it now, but no one has ever seen that scroll happen like that. And then he goes, and then he says, you can see his excitement comes through because let's try that again. And so, he didn't want, that was like his foot stomper moment. He didn't want him to miss just how cool that was. So if the buddy or friend of the person who was looking away and checking his email or whatever he was doing missed it, it's like, oh, I missed it. Now he gets a chance to see it. It's like a little rerun of that. By showing it twice, he's emphasizing it even more. And then he did it a third time. He goes, let's scroll backwards. Listen to that language. Let's, we. He's bringing the audience into it. We're talking about, don't you think this is cool? No, we think this is cool. We're doing it together. And so that demo is expressing his excitement and passion about the product. So now finally he gets, and this is where he kind of had me at hello here, but he basically gets to the top and he scrolls to the top of the list. And it bounces in this kind of rubber band way to show that you've hit the end of the list. That user interface technique had never been used before. I know a lot about user interface. I'd never seen that on any product, not smartphone, anywhere, that they sort of showed the end of the list in this sort of compelling way. When he first launched the Macintosh, rubber band windows was what he called it, where you click on an icon and it rubber bands up to the whole window on the screen. These are things that we sort of have gotten used to or have gotten really cool the way you can do it now. But when you first see that, you say, oh my gosh, that is cool. I want that. So he didn't really explain the technology behind how that list could work or go into as much depth as I just did, trying to get you a sense of the coolness of it. He just flicked it and maybe mentioned how it bounced at the end. So this is the power of show, don't tell. So I just want to check my time here. So got another one to go. So law of rationing. Okay, so for those who aren't as old as me, there used to be a commercial for Heinz ketchup where it showed about how slow the ketchup came out of the bottle, because no one likes runny ketchup. So So you turn the bottle upside down and slowly it drips down and finally hits the hamburger. And so, you want, it's Anticipation was the song that kind of played in the background. Carole King's, I think, Anticipation. But anyway, that's playing in the background. And finally the ketchup, just about gets ready to fall away from the bottle and hit the, so we want to see that ketchup hit the cheeseburger or whatever it might be. It never hits the cheeseburger. It's just there. You're in that little suspended moment of anticipation. So you've shown a lot of things. If the demo's gone well, you've shown your 3 wows. Maybe you've done like Steve Jobs, you've got 15 wows that you showed through the whole thing. But there's still one more thing. And he was that master of sort of that one more thing that people were kind of waiting for at the end. So build that anticipation, leave them wanting more. And then the real leave them wanting more in his case was go out and buy the product. Because if you want to experience your own version of all of this and not just see me, the recording stop. Okay, you got it going again. So okay, so let's see what's next. So I think, Jim, the next thing was the tell a story. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen here.
Okay, I'll go back to the other screen. Alrighty. All right.
Okay.
Tell a story.
Tell a story. So first of all, storytelling in general is much more memorable than any word on any slide. It's much more memorable than any sort of like little canned speech of here. I'm gonna assume that 5 days from now, if someone asks you what happened in this pitch, you're not going to remember a single word on any of these slides. You have a better than even chance of remembering foot stomping moments. Because I've given this little story of my own personal background of what it was like to be a cadet sleeping and having to wake up to hear that something just happened in the room that I care about. See, I've little repetition there to lock that memory in a little bit more, a little bit of feeling about, oh my, I was so worried. And then I passed the test because I was able to pass it down. So we've encapsulated a whole little story around this little tiny, which is almost like a side point of doing a demo, which I wanted to come back and get to Jim's, silence is signal, and my, price is a proxy for value, the importance of these little snippets. So I guess the reason for that the reason I said all of that is that a personal story that connects somehow to what you're doing or what you want them to remember is going to be much more powerful than points on a slide. So now,
in that regard, Lee, I would say to bring it home in the legal tech context, I think some of the best demos I've seen or done really have involved the use case from start to finish. So, hey, in our case, we had Joinder. It was, okay, the paralegal needs to do this. It moves to the junior associate, and then we have a workflow for the approval by the partner, and then it goes over to the client. And we worked hard to develop demos that showed that story, so they saw the complete life cycle of the product, and in the course of doing that, they saw a lot of the features of the product. Now, again, this takes time. It is not something you necessarily want to do before you've baked the demo, to really build out the data, because you can spend a lot of time making these very personal or making these very making these demos match the use case with detailed data in your application. You don't want to be looking at a blank screen. You don't want to be looking at someone's own account. You want to be looking at something that is familiar and relatable to your audience as you possibly can. And so telling a story also comes down to actually preparing the data, having a data set and an account that you only use for demoing and that really is relatable to them immediately. And I want to say too that I've heard a lot of really powerful things from folks in our workshop groups about how they're leveraging these kind of techniques. And my favorite one recently is, if you have a product that, say, processes a contract in some way, or takes a document and does something to it, it checks the citations, or suggests better wording, or there's a lot of those out there. Those are great products. They're really, really helpful. I heard a company that is asking the potential client before the demo to send them a contract. Send them something, send them an example, and make the demo actually about processing their actual document. This is super powerful. This is a super powerful way for them to really get the impact of what that product is going to mean in their daily life. Or other examples, if you've got, say, an ROI calculator that you run, make that part of the demo. Actually, that is a nice transition from product to more of the kind of selling context to say, hey, well, I want to finish this demo by talking about your situation and how much time do you spend on this? Whatever your ROI calculation variables are, engaging them at the end of the demo in completing the process so that you can show them immediately, wow, well, this is great because you save a lot of money with this product, right? Make it personal, make it specific to them. It is more work, but it's in many cases definitely going to be worth it. And Lee, if it's okay, I'll go to the next one, which is, I'm kind of a broken record on this, but it's, if you can, they're going to be concerned about security and privacy and legal tech. That's just who your buyer is. So try to make that part of your standard demo. Go to those pages in your product, go to your security or trust center, make those a stop along the way so they know it's top of mind for you and they'll worry about it less. They'll figure, okay, these guys are attending to it. They made it part of their demo. I think I can check that box for now until my InfoSec team has to come in and take a deeper look at it. So, don't make them ask about it. Go ahead and put it in. And finally, final tip here for you before we go to Q&A is, we're talking today about live demos, but don't forget, there's incredible power and leverage in recorded demos. And in the extreme case, it's good to get in the habit of whenever you have a product update, creating a new canned demo, maybe one or two of them, if you can afford the time, if it makes sense, if you have different use cases, but maybe at least one. So you could send anybody a link to a demo they can enjoy asynchronously, and they can get almost the same impact out of it. It's not interactive, but I've certainly been on enough demos where there was so little interaction that I felt in the end like, well, boy, they could have watched a video and we could have just had a conversation after. So think about creating those demos and canned demos, and those don't have to be fancy in my experience. They really can be, you go through the product on Loom or whatever your platform of choice might be. You go through the product, it can be ugly, cut out the bad parts, stitch it together, and then you've got a, not to exceed 2-minute version of your standard demo that you can send to anybody if you can't book an appointment. It's kind of sad to say we're going to book an appointment for 3 weeks from now, when in fact, in 2 minutes, you could get a lot of the impact from that. Now it's better to be live. It's always better to have the interaction, but let's face it, that's not always going to happen. So try to keep a canned demo on hand at all times. And the other nice thing about that is it gives you a bit of analytics. If you do it on Vimeo or sites that have an analytics component to them, you can see exactly when people are falling off. And I was certainly learned a lot from looking at those analytics and thinking, wow, they always seem to drop off when I get to this part. Well, maybe I shouldn't do that part, right? So this is part of the tool set that you have to make these demos better and better, is to deliver them asynchronously. So that concludes the outline. Before we go into Q&A, I just want to mention that we're going to have another workshop in a couple weeks. And the topic of that one is going to be the directory universe. There are lots of places where your company and your product can be listed and become present and available for potential buyers and investors. I'm talking about Crunchbase, AngelList, Legal Tech Hub, Theorem Marketplace. There's a bunch of them, Capterra. What we're going to do in the next workshop is tear those down and take a look at what each of them requires, why you might want to be on one or more of those directories, and what's really involved in doing it and keeping it up to date. So watch out for an invitation on that. So Lee, if you have any other concluding remarks, then we can go into Q&A.
The only concluding remark that I would make, another foot stomping moment on something Jim said, is put the customer's data in your demo and find a way to do that. And even if you use a standard demo PowerPoint that you always use, but if you have a couple places where you can put the customer's logo or the customer whatever, people want to see they want to see themselves in your product. And Lorenzo's first law of selling is show the customer your product with their data in it, and you'll sell them. It always happens. So that's it.
So if there are any questions, or if folks want to relate any of their own experiences, this would be a good time. Don't be shy.
And also feel free to tell us what we asked for at the beginning, which is the parts that you found most useful or the parts where we went off track. I know it's hard in Zoom for someone to have enough guts to sort of say the first thing or go off mute and say the first thing, but dive in there if you want to, or just stick it in the chat and we'll respond to it there.
Well, someone's raised their hand. Oh, here. Oh, I see. Go ahead, Scott.
Hey guys, thanks for the chat today. It's really good. One thing I just wanted to kind of more share, but to back up a lot of the stuff you were saying, and that's on asking the questions on the front end. It's something that we've got better and better at over time. And now, I don't know what the number of demos we've done, but it's getting up there, getting probably close to the 100 number. And I think as part of that, really for us and our product, really digging in on the pain points and really understanding where they're felt, and then taking that to just tailor your demo a little bit is it feels very customized on their side of it. And it's just a really nice way to kind of dig in on what they care about for someone like us, where there's, a variety of pain points that may be stronger than others. So just kind of sharing.
Yeah, it sounds like that. Well, let me ask, has the feedback loop from your demos affected your product, your actual design and roadmap?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, we view it always as an opportunity to learn at the same time. So we know those aren't all turning into sales at the end of the day. So it being an opportunity to understand our customers better or potential customers better down the road. So we definitely take a lot of that and pull it back into our systems for further consideration on the product side for sure.
That's great.
How do you get them to talk about their pain points? I mean, this kind of concept of probe for pain, but I mean, people are naturally reluctant to say anything. So what's the opening line that gets them to open up about that?
Yeah, so our product lives in the world of pricing within legal, which is kind of a new category on its own to start with. And so the people that we're trying to get in front of are generally innovative law firms or legal professional individuals. And so we're living in a fairly niche space. And so because of that, we can hit on that from the very beginning and try and understand what do your pricing processes look like right now and where are the pain points that you're feeling specifically around pricing. And it allows the natural lead in for us to have the conversations touching on those points during the demo.
So that helps illuminate what you're really doing. The first question is, tell us your process. Everyone's going to know how to answer that question because they have some process probably. And in general, they're willing to probably share some of that. It's not proprietary. So, and then that opens the door to what's the pain, what's not working, what would you like to work better, all those kinds of phrases that get to the pain points. So that's really
exactly.
smart, really smart. Yeah, cool.
Yeah, I remember one demo where it started as a demo and they started engaging on their pain points, and we just stopped the demo completely. We spent an hour talking about a bunch of pain points that it turns out our product could answer, but they were not in focus for us. And the roadmap was not tied down for that. And I remember that demo because I think it moved our company, and our direction and our roadmap in a material way, just in that 1 hour. And it started as a demo. And so, yeah, that's what's fun about a startup, right? Is those interactions that lead you in a better direction. And what we're talking about here with demos is exactly that. That's the heart of it.
Yeah, and I think it's a powerful thing on the customer side as well, because I think it shows care. It shows that you care as a company, what their pain points are, and you're down the road you can bring that back as, hey, we listened 6 months ago, here it is, right. And it's a really powerful thing to circle back on when the timing's right.
And even a demo that ends in silence or doesn't go anywhere in terms of the sales process, you're exactly right, Scott. I love that because these people are now accessible, approachable. They've met you, they've seen your face. And when you come at them and say, hey, I want to show you something that we did in response to your comment, you've got someone really engaged who will work with you to extract the value and the requirements out of that. So, that is the goal that we're mining here, is those relationships. And so that's great to hear that you've had that experience too.
Yeah, so we're totally going to steal from you into the next version of this pitch, Scott. Ask them first about their process, and then probe for pain. That's my next version of a three-word tagline for what we want to do in here. So when you listen through this pitch, and obviously anyone else can chime in with questions, but I'm just curious. Obviously, you know more about some of these sections than we do, so that's great. we'd love to get your notes. But were there any things that you heard that would say, oh, okay, that's a new thing, or I ought to apply that, or something there where it was like, oh, I should probably make a note of that? Did anything resonate at that level?
Yeah, definitely. I don't like the idea of the foot stomper. Like, I think that's a nice way of putting it. And I think, Jim, you said this, it kind of ties in at the beginning. And I think the idea of, I think we kind of naturally do this, but haven't necessarily like written down prior to a demo, written down, hey, here are the takeaways we're trying to get the customer to understand based on what we know about them. I think that process is really healthy. I'll always do the due diligence on our end to make sure we know who they are, you know, what practice areas, what size they're from, do our due diligence to make sure that we can make it fit who they are. But actually writing down the takeaways, I think, would naturally allow us as the people doing the demo to come back to those points. And I think that would tie very nicely with this concept of pain points, and bringing those two concepts together. You're probably allowing them to walk away with, hey, here's 3 things that really stuck and will be the ones they remember for sure.
Great. Any other questions or experiences to relate?
I thought I'd jump in and share a little something. So Scott and I, we have co-founded a company called AltFee. So this is coming from a similar perspective, but in terms of the customization of the pitch, one of the things that we found is, and also touches on Lee, your point about commonality and getting to that place with someone that you've just landed on a Zoom call with, is because of the global nature of what we're selling, we end up talking to people all around the world. And so our demo account, we've actually built out around a fictitious law firm called Hoopers & Co. And that's just because when we were in the early days, we needed something to build the data out from, and Scott and I are basketball fans. So that's what we went with. And it's hilarious. It's like, it works really nicely as a bit of an icebreaker at the start of the demo, because Americans love it because lots of basketball fans in the States. But when we're talking with Australians, we've joked about the fact, like, we almost need to tweak the demo account for the different sports cultures that we're pitching to. But what you guys said today that resonated with me, that I think would allow us to take to another level, is instead of using these fictitious names, we may keep the fictitious firm name, but it'd be cool to take the person we're demoing to and have slot them in as the user that we're demoing as, and just take it, like, show that little bit of extra care, that little bit of extra thoughtfulness, and make it personal, as you guys said. So I took that away from today. So I just wanted to share.
I love it.
Exactly. That's a great idea. And I like to just emphasize what Jim said earlier about, hey, send us a contract. Dating myself, I used to sell VisiCalc in one of the first computer stores in San Antonio. And when VisiCalc first came out, no one had seen a spreadsheet before. Okay, so I couldn't say, oh, so I would say, hey, you probably have some, rows and columns, tabular sheets. You keep track of your inventory or your stats on it. Bring those into me. And then while they're off at lunch or whatever, come back in a couple hours. I would put them into a spreadsheet, and then they'd be back in. They'd see their names for the rows, their names for the columns, and then there'd be some summing up and adding. And I say, what happens now when that number's wrong? Well, we have to get out the whiteout, recalculate all the things. And then I could just show them the magic of a spreadsheet, which you just change the number, the whole thing recalculated. Mm-hmm. We always sold not just VisiCalc, but the Apple II that went with it. I mean, everything to get that, because they had seen their data in your application. As soon as that happens, they're going to want it. And then you just tell them the price, like you guys do with your AltFee thing. Just tell them the price and off they go. So.
Yeah. Well, thank you, everybody. That concludes it, and really appreciate it. And to answer one question we got in the chat, there will of course be a replay, and you're absolutely free to share that with your team and others. So thanks, everybody. Have a terrific week, and go get them.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, guys.